Let's replace this inner tie rod boot on this Kubota. Hey guys, welcome to the bar channel. We're either building it, assembling it, repairing it, or just replacing it. If you're new to the channel, go ahead and hit that subscribe button for future videos. If you're a subscriber, well, welcome back. What I'm working on today is the inner tie rod boot on my Kubota BX23S. As you can see, these boots are all torn up and they're not lasting. I checked with the dealer for replacement boots and they wanted about 70 bucks per boot. I found some aftermarket boot on eBay for like 24 bucks. Check the description below for the link for the boots I bought, and they are working out pretty good. Let's see how I get them installed. First, I jacked the tractor up by using the bucket. I lift it up, get the wheels off the ground, and I pull the wheel off. Now what I'm doing is I'm gonna mark the retaining nut. This nut, I'm gonna mark a line on the top and an X on one side. That way it can get the placement back correctly. So let's go ahead and get this this tie rod removed and proceed with changing the bolt. Now what you see here is a castle nut that's been held in place with the cotter pin. So let me get my combination wrench and start loosening up this tie rod, getting the nuts free and the bolts free, and disassemble. Now if you look, I'm going to take a step back a little bit and look. This is how I kept the tractor jacked up. What I did was I used the bucket and I propped it up so the front wheels are off the ground and it's just being suspended. What you want to do is just be careful, because as the fluid starts leaking back, it'll bleed out and the front of the tractor will drop. So let me remove this cotter pin first. So I'm gonna just get it straight, pull it out. You're really not supposed to be reusing cotter pins. Every time you pull it out, you're supposed to put a new one in. They're intended for one-time use, single use. However, I'm gonna reuse mine, so I'm gonna save it for later, straighten it out and reuse it. Now with my 17 millimeter, I'm gonna go ahead and unscrew that castle nut and get it out from the bolt itself, the pivot. As you can see that this tie rod is wedged in there pretty tight. You're not gonna be able to shake it loose by hand. You want to be able to tap it out and or use a front end service tool. Here I hit it with the hammer and I saw that the threads were starting to get damaged, so I screwed the nut in about halfway, and when I screwed it in, then I was able to tap on the nut itself. Therefore it didn't damage the threads any further. This particular side gave me a headache to put back on due to the damaged threads. So now I've got the nut back in and I tapped it. It should pop right out. As you can see here, this nut is giving me a hard time to remove again, because I think I did some more damage to the threads. It's got tight. So I'm gonna get it off and try to thread it back in by hand, and you'll see that it's tight when I try to put it back in. That's because the thread got damaged. I believe that the nut and the thread um, both got damaged from tapping the nut on. So I've seen some people use the nut and tap it out, and some people just use a piece of wood to tap that part out. I would recommend that if you have a tractor, get a front end service tool. Now that I've got that loosened and free, I'm gonna go ahead and get this spring clip out, get all that extra rubber out, um, and move forward with getting the replaced. This is what the front end service tool looks like, and I got this from Harbor Freight, and I guess I was too lazy to go pull it out to use it, so instead I used the hammer. Now when removing this tie rod, you want to make sure you count the number of turns it takes to unscrew this tie rod. So when your starting point, where you start from, you want to make sure you count the number of full revolution it takes to remove it, so you can get this back in the correct spot for the right alignment of the tractor itself. Now that I got that piece out, what I'm going to do now is when I'm removing this nut, I'm going to count the number of full revolution it takes to remove this nut. That way I can get it back in the correct position. And once I install it, I can line up my X and my line to get the correct position for the nut. Now that I've got this off, what I'm gonna do is get some brake cleaner and just clean out all the heavy debris, um, and wipe it down, remove everything that's there that does not belong, and get ready for reinstallation of the boot itself. Now this is the aftermarket part I ordered from eBay. As you can see, it come with a bunch of different thickness of washers and E-clip and the two boots. The only thing I don't like about it is that the boot doesn't seal on one end, but when you put it on, you can see that there's nothing that can get in. Um, I just don't like the fact that it doesn't seal from one end. Here's the installation instruction that they give you, and it's a basically simple instruction on how to install the boot itself. So what I've got here is some high temperature grease. That's like the red grease. I'm gonna pack this joint full of grease as much as I can. I'll pack it in there, work it up and down, in and out by moving the joint left, right, up, down to make sure grease gets everywhere in there. And I'm gonna pack it good, and then go ahead and install the boots. Now, once you put the boots in place, you have to get your nylon washer set and see which washer best fits for your tractor, because I believe this kit is made for different tractors. That's why they give you two different thickness of the washer. Here you can see that the thinner washer is probably the one that fits for me, so I'm gonna get that pushed in. It's a little bit tight, so you have to work with it to slide it past the shaft, and then I'm gonna go ahead and put my E-clip in place. So let me just get this pushed in, and then I'm gonna move on to the other part. Now that that's in, let me get my E-clip and put it in place. When you look at your E-clip, you'll see one side has a little bit of a bevel edge and the other side has a smooth edge. The smooth edge is the part that goes on the inside, the bevel edge on the outside. I don't think it makes much of a difference, but I just like to put it that way because it's like that for a reason. So let me go ahead and just exercise this a little bit, clean off the excess grease, and see what kind of space I've got. Now I'm going to thread my nut back in. The same amount of turns it took to remove it, I'm going to go ahead and spin that in, starting with the same amount of turns. So I'm going to count the number of revolution that I took to remove it, count it back in the same way. Once I get that in place, I'm going to go ahead and put this tie rod back in, the same way, count it in by the number of revolution. So let me get this back in place so it can align properly. As you can see, you're going to have to fiddle with the nut a little bit to get the right count and the right revolution. So you'll have to play with it to make sure you get it to the right spot. Now that I've got my count in, let me get this ball joint back in place. That way I can put back my castle nut and start and tighten things down. So here is where I started running into problems. Trying to tighten this nut, I turned it, and because the threads were a little bit damaged, the entire ball joint was spinning. So I'm gonna try to get the rubber mallet and hit it down in place and see if I can get that in, because normally what would happen, the nut would go on freely and pull the shaft down, but because the threads were damaged, I'm starting to have issues with this now. Here is a closer look of what was happening as I'm putting the nut back in. You'll see it gets tight and it won't go anymore. Normally it would thread all the way up to that base past the hole by hand, and you'll have to use the wrench and it'll pull that joint out, but that's it. Would not go any more past that. So I believe what I had to do was remove the uh, the nut and do some filing on the bolt itself. With some persistence, I was able to finally get it in down to where I needed it to be so I could insert the cotter pin. Once I got the cotter pin insert, I'm gonna go ahead and do my final tight down. So let me get this cotter pin in. Align the nut properly to the hole and push that cotter pin in and just twist it around. Some people go towards the bottom, some people go around the nut. Either which way, it's not wrong. The idea for the cotter pin is just to prevent the nut from backing out. So once the cotter pin is in place, the nut won't come out. And now let's get this all tightened down the way it was. Now as you can see, all my alignments are back in place originally. And this is what you would look like when it's done. There's no gap from the boots, it's just to the edge of that shiny round pivot ball. So I'm just examining, making sure that the turns and the pivots, everything works good and the wheel looks straight. Now let me get my wheel back, put it back in place, and I can go ahead and work on the other side. And when I did the other side, I used my front end service tool to avoid that issue. The other side was fairly quick, um, probably 1/3 or a quarter of the time it took for me to do this side, and most of the time I spent working on this side was because I damaged the threads on that ball joint. So good luck with getting your inner tie rod boots replaced. It's a fairly simple job. Just use the right tool and catch you in the next video. Like, share, and subscribe. Thanks.